a colleague sat down at my desk and said, "Since you're single and I have a family, you should cover my late shifts." When I refused, he scoffed, "Wow, so you're just selfish?" I smiled, pulled up his work log, and said, "That's funny, because you've already left early every day this month." I work as a nurse in the emergency department of a major hospital in Chicago. The job is demanding, with long hours and unpredictable shifts. It's a high-stress environment, but I find fulfillment in helping patients during their most vulnerable moments. Being single, I often have the flexibility to adapt to the erratic schedule, but that doesn't mean I'm without personal commitments or the need for rest. One of my colleagues, whom I'll call Mike, has a reputation for dodging the less desirable shifts. Mike is married with 2 young children, and he frequently uses his family obligations as a reason to leave work early or to avoid certain assignments. While I understand the challenges of balancing work and family life, it becomes frustrating when his responsibilities are unfairly shifted onto others. One afternoon, after a particularly grueling shift, I was at my desk finishing up some paperwork. Mike approached me with a casual demeanor that suggested he was about to ask for a favor. "Hey," Mike began, leaning against my desk. "I was wondering if you could cover my late shifts this week. With the kids and all, things have been really hectic at home." I looked up from my paperwork, already feeling a sense of irritation. This wasn't the first time Mike had asked me to cover for him, and I suspected it wouldn't be the last. "Mike, I understand that things can be tough at home," I replied, trying to keep my tone neutral. "But I have my own commitments and can't take on extra shifts this week." Mike's expression changed instantly. He scoffed and said, "Wow, so you're just selfish?" I felt a surge of anger but maintained my composure. Without saying a word, I turned to my computer and pulled up the department's work log. I scrolled through the records and then looked back at Mike. "That's funny," I said, keeping my voice calm. "Because according to this, you've left early every day this month." Mike's face turned red, and he opened his mouth as if to respond, but then closed it again. He stood there for a moment before muttering something under his breath and walking away. I took a deep breath, trying to shake off the encounter. I hoped that by confronting Mike with the facts, he would reconsider his behavior. However, I had a nagging feeling that this wasn't the end of the issue. In the days that followed, I noticed a change in the atmosphere among my colleagues. Conversations would hush when I entered the room, and I caught a few nurses exchanging glances in my direction. It became clear that Mike had been talking about our exchange, possibly portraying me in a negative light. Determined not to let the situation escalate further, I decided to address the issue directly. I approached our department supervisor, explained the situation, and provided evidence from the work logs. The supervisor took the matter seriously and assured me that it would be handled appropriately. A few days later, a department-wide meeting was held to discuss the importance of fairness in shift assignments and the need for all staff members to share responsibilities equitably. While Mike wasn't named directly, the message was clear. Following the meeting, the tension in the department began to ease. Mike stopped making requests for me to cover his shifts, and the whispering among colleagues subsided. It was a reminder that standing up for oneself, even in a professional setting, is necessary to maintain a fair and respectful work environment. After that meeting, things seemed to settle down for a while. Mike stopped talking to me altogether, which was honestly a relief. The silent treatment was better than the passive-aggressive remarks or fake pleasantries. I kept my head down, did my work, and tried to move on. But I should have known better. A few weeks later, I started noticing weird things. Small, but annoying. Supplies I had personally stocked during my shift would be mysteriously gone the next morning. Notes I'd left for handoffs were either missing or altered. One day, I came in and found that someone had accidentally signed me up for a double shift I hadn't agreed to. It felt too targeted to be random. At first, I brushed it off. Maybe it was a system glitch. Maybe someone was just careless. But then it happened again. And again. Always on my shifts. Always in ways that made me look forgetful or unprofessional. The breaking point came one evening when I was reviewing a patient's chart. The dosage notes for a medication were off, way off. If I hadn't caught it, the patient could have been seriously harmed. I double-checked everything, and sure enough, I had entered the correct info the day before. Someone had edited it. That night, I barely slept. The next morning, I went straight to IT and asked them if there was a way to track changes in the system. They were hesitant at first, protocols and privacy concerns, but after explaining the situation and dropping a few hints about patient safety, they agreed to look into it. 2 days later, the head of IT called me into a side office. "We found something," he said, closing the door behind him. "All the edits, the shift changes, the deleted notes, they're coming from the same login." My heart sank. "Whose?" He showed me the screen. It was Mike. I stared at the screen for a long time, not saying anything. A part of me wanted to scream. Another part wasn't even surprised. He couldn't push me around directly anymore, so now he was trying to sabotage me quietly, from the shadows. I thanked the IT guy and left. I wasn't sure what to do next. If I went straight to HR or the nursing board, it'd be a huge deal. It could ruin his career. But if I stayed quiet, he'd just keep going, maybe even worse next time. I decided to wait and think, just for a bit. That same week, one of the newer nurses, Jenna, cornered me in the locker room. She looked nervous, like she'd been holding something in for too long. I don't want to start drama, she said, but Mike's been saying stuff about you. That you're trying to get him fired. That you've been making mistakes on purpose and blaming him. I felt a lump in my throat. And, she added, lowering her voice, he said you were unstable. That you might snap one day. Now it was clear. He wasn't just trying to sabotage my work, he was setting me up. Building a narrative. Making people question my professionalism, my mental state. I realized then, this wasn't just pettiness. This was strategic. Calculated. I walked out of that locker room, sat in my car, and stared at the dashboard for almost an hour. This wasn't a misunderstanding or office drama. This was war. So I started documenting everything. I printed logs, screenshots, backed up files. I made sure every shift I worked was clean, every patient note perfect. I recorded timestamps for everything. I got witnesses for my tasks, even if I had to play dumb and pretend I needed a second opinion. Then I started watching him. Mike thought he was untouchable. He'd been in the hospital longer than me. He was friends with some of the older staff. He played the family man card constantly, but he had tells. Little cracks in the armor. One night, I stayed an hour after my shift pretending to finish reports. Really, I was just watching. I saw Mike go into the admin office, where the scheduling computer was. No one else was around. The next day, I found out I'd been assigned another double. I didn't say anything. Not yet. Instead, I asked IT for camera footage from outside the admin office. I played dumb again, acted like I was worried someone might have messed up the schedule by accident. They pulled the footage. It showed exactly what I saw. Now I had everything. The logs, the proof of altered charts, eyewitnesses, video evidence. Still, I wasn't sure how to play it. If I brought it all forward now, it would explode. HR would launch an investigation. There'd be meetings, hearings, legal steps. It could drag on for months. And worse, I'd still have to work alongside him during it all. So I waited. And I planned. Because if Mike wanted to treat me like a villain, I could give him one. I kept everything quiet for now. Just watched. Waited. Let him think he was winning. Mike had no idea I already had enough to destroy him. But something in me wanted him to dig deeper. I wanted to catch him so far in his own web he couldn't crawl out of it. Then, something happened that I didn't expect. One morning, I got called into a sudden peer review. No warning. Just a calendar invite from the head of nursing. My stomach dropped. That's not normal. Peer reviews happen, sure, but they're scheduled in advance. You get a heads up. This felt off. When I walked in, 3 people were already seated. My supervisor, the head of HR, and Mike. He looked at me like he'd just won the lottery. HR opened with, "We've received multiple concerns about your recent behavior." I didn't say anything. Just listened. Mike spoke next. His voice was calm, rehearsed. He talked about a pattern of erratic decisions, tensions with staff, and then he pulled out a stack of printed documents, altered patient charts, the very ones I'd already backed up in their original forms. He claimed I was covering my mistakes by blaming him. The smugness in his voice made me nauseous. He handed over what looked like a log showing errors linked to my login credentials, fabricated entries he must have altered to match his narrative. And I realized something right then. He was in way deeper than I thought. This wasn't just petty sabotage anymore. This was a full-blown takedown attempt. I asked one question. "May I speak to IT?" They hesitated. I didn't. I pulled out my phone, opened my folder, and showed them a PDF. This is a full activity log from IT, verified by timestamp. Here's where Mike used the admin computer under his login. Here are the edits to patient charts. Here's the security footage of him outside the admin office after hours. I watched Mike's face twitch as the color drained from it. HR took my phone. They asked me to leave the room. I sat outside for 47 minutes. I counted every second. When they called me back in, Mike was gone. HR said they'd be launching a full investigation, effective immediately. I wasn't allowed to discuss it with anyone while it was active. I nodded and left. For the next week, things got weird. Really weird. Mike didn't show up to work, but no one knew why. Word was spreading fast. People who'd once side-eyed me were now avoiding eye contact altogether. One of the nurses I barely knew whispered in passing, he messed with the wrong one. But then something twisted happened. One night, I got a call from an unknown number. I almost didn't answer, but something told me to. It was Mike's wife. She was crying. "I'm sorry to call," she said, her voice shaking. "I don't know what happened between you and Mike. But he's spiraling. He's saying someone's out to ruin him. I stayed silent. He won't tell me anything. He's been drinking. He's not himself. I wanted to be cold. I wanted to tell her, that's his problem. But instead, I said, I hope he gets help. I hung up. 2 days later, the hospital's legal department called me in. Turns out, Mike hadn't just been messing with my shifts and records. He'd been manipulating data on several cases, probably trying to cover his tracks in ways that started affecting patient care. The state nursing board was getting involved now. It was bigger than I thought. That's when HR asked me something I didn't expect. Would you be willing to testify if this goes beyond internal investigation? I nodded slow. Yes. I wasn't looking for revenge when this started. I just wanted fairness. Respect. A workplace where I wasn't treated like a doormat just because I don't have kids. But now, this was something else entirely. This wasn't just about Mike anymore. This was about every single person who's ever been told to just take it in silence. Every nurse, every worker who's been gaslit and manipulated and then painted as the villain. And I had the receipts. But I wasn't finished. Because a week after that, someone slipped a folder under my locker door. No name, no note. Inside? Screenshots of group messages. Private group chats between Mike and 3 other nurses. About me. Calling me crazy. Planning how they'd get rid of the dead weight. Joking about screwing with patient logs to get her reported. And 2 of those nurses? Still working here. The folder of screenshots felt heavier than it should have. It was thick, dozens of printouts from what looked like a private group chat. Mike. 2 other nurses, Rachel and Tom. All people I worked with every day. People I'd sat with during long shifts, people I'd laughed with in the break room. Now I knew they'd been plotting behind my back. Not just passive remarks or petty gossip. Actual coordination. They joked about deleting or changing patient information to make me look incompetent. Called me unstable, bitter loner. There was even a message where Tom said, if she snaps, we'll say we tried to help her. We'll all back each other. That one made my blood run cold. I didn't sleep that night. I stared at my ceiling, the glow of the city flickering through the blinds. My brain spun in circles. I'd spent months trying to protect myself, to stay professional, and now this? This was beyond anything I'd prepared for. The next morning, I brought the folder to HR and said only this. There's more. They took it seriously. Very seriously. Within hours, hospital security got involved. IT confirmed the group chat logs were real. They'd been exchanged through work emails on personal devices. The nurses involved were pulled from their shifts midday. Whispered rumors started flying through every hallway. But it wasn't over. That same week, the hospital announced a mandatory staff meeting, addressing workplace conduct and safety. No one was told what it was about, but everyone knew. The conference room was packed. All eyes turned to the front when the head of HR stepped up to the mic, followed by the chief nursing officer. Then they dropped the bomb. A formal investigation had found multiple staff members guilty of misconduct, tampering with medical documentation, and targeted harassment of a fellow employee. They didn't name names yet, but people were already looking around. Then came the twist. They invited me to speak. I hadn't expected that. My palms were sweating. But I stood up, walked to the front, and looked out at the sea of faces. My voice shook a little, but I spoke. I never asked for this. I came here to work, to care for people, and to do my part in a hard job. I never imagined I'd have to defend myself from the people I trusted. I paused. The room was dead silent. I stayed late. I covered shifts. I gave others the benefit of the doubt. And when I said no, when I finally stood up for myself, I was painted as the problem. I looked directly at Rachel and Tom in the crowd. Their faces were stone. Mike wasn't even there. He'd already been placed on indefinite leave. You didn't just try to ruin my reputation. You risked patients' lives to make a point. And with that, I walked out. I didn't need applause. I didn't want sympathy. I just wanted them to feel it. The aftermath was fast and messy. Mike resigned before they could fire him. Rachel and Tom were both suspended pending state review. Rumor had it they'd lose their licenses. Some nurses defended them, said it was all a misunderstanding. Others, mostly the quiet ones, told me privately they were glad someone finally stood up. Jenna, the young nurse who warned me early on, cried when she saw me again. I'm so sorry. I knew something was wrong, but I didn't know how bad it was. It's okay, I told her. You spoke up. That counts. Sarah, my closest ally through it all, brought me coffee the next day. It's over, she said, handing it to me with a shaky smile. But it didn't feel over. Not really. I had dreams for weeks. Of walking into empty rooms. Of charts missing. Of people whispering. The fear didn't go away right away. The betrayal had cut deep. There was grief in it. Grief for the trust one lost. For the version of myself that believed if I just kept my head down, I'd be safe. But there was relief too. Because the mask had come off. The game was exposed. And I was still standing. In the weeks that followed, the hospital brought in counselors, held team-building sessions, revamped their reporting process. HR asked if I wanted to transfer departments. I thought about it, but I said no. This is my floor. I'm not running. The people who mattered saw the truth. The people who didn't? I no longer cared. And Mike? Last I heard, he'd moved states. Trying to start over. I don't wish him well. But I don't think about him much either. I learned something about myself through all this. I'm not just someone who puts up with things to keep the peace. I'm someone who fights when the peace is fake. So no, I'm not broken. I'm just done pretending.